Hey guys, what's happening? Niyat here with Film Comics Explained, and today we'll be taking a look at the vampires featured in the Underworld series starring Kate Beckinsale, Bill Nye, Scott Speedman and Michael Sheen. The vampires were essentially a subspecies of Immortals that had been infected with a variant of the Corvinus strain, granting them superhuman speed, reflexes, enhanced healing and resilience, as well as general immortality to live on throughout the ages. At the same time, this group also developed a severe weakness to ultraviolet radiation and a ravenous thirst for human blood. As mentioned in my video on the lichens, which I'll leave a link to below, all Immortals were descended from Alexander Corvinus and his wife Helena. Alexander, who was a Hungarian nobleman, watched his town get ravaged by a deadly virus, only to find that he himself was a sole survivor due to his rare genetic mutation. This was in turn passed on to his sons, Marcus, William, and a third unnamed human who received the Corvinus strain in its dormant form. William was bitten by a black rabid wolf, and due to his rare genetic mutation, he began to turn into the first werewolf, while his twin brother Marcus suffered a bite from a bat, turning him into the first vampire in existence. As the progenitor of the vampire species, Marcus was the most powerful of his kind, with the exception of hybrids that would later be created, like Michael Coven, who was a descendant of the third infected son of Alexander. The vampire virus would cause biological changes to its hosts, endowing them with heightened senses and physical attributes that would all be accelerated, pushing their capabilities to its furthermost limits. As a result, vampires were seen to possess superhuman strength, speed, agility, reflexes, endurance, durability, and accelerated healing.
Marcus. He's the one. The source. The first true vampire.
While the vampire infection was enough to grant all of these powers on its own, as the series progressed, we also discovered there were rituals in place to further increase the vampire's aptitude, like the Nordic Coven sacred ritual, which blessed those that were chosen with further enhancements to their speed, strength, and endurance, whilst also granting them the ability to read people's souls. In saying that, this ritual was actually kept as a secret for most vampires, with only a handful of them being aware of its existence.
I see much about you,
Such as?
I can see you've loved a lichen, killed a vampire elder, and given birth.
Stop.
The heightened senses of the vampires would manifest in the form of increased depth perception, sense of smell, hearing, and night vision. However, they constantly needed to feed to ensure that their peak levels were maintained. In the films, Celine and the other death dealers were seen leaping from very high locations and landing on the ground without any physical injury, almost as though their bones and joints were both elastic and reinforced at the same time. They were also shown exhibiting remarkable strength and speed in their engagements with lichens, humans, and other vampires. I also thought it was pretty interesting that the vampires displayed the ability to obtain memories through the ingestion of blood, possibly due to the virus affecting their brain and nerves, enabling them to both obtain and decode bioorganic data. In the history of the Underworld lore, it's explained that in order to capture his rogue and bestial brother William, Marcus had turned to an aging warlord named Victor and granted him immortality by turning him and his lieutenant Emilia into the first generation of vampires. Because Victor and Emilia were infected with the purest form of the vampire virus, they, along with Marcus, far surpassed the abilities of regular vampires and were granted the title of Vampire Elders. To ensure the continued survival of their species, the three shared rulership over the Empire and created a set of rules that guided the behavior and actions of all vampires. Concealment. Vampires are to conceal themselves from humans at all costs, unless meaning to turn them. Blood consumption. Vampires are not allowed to drink human blood in the open. Interspecies relations. Vampires are not permitted to fraternize or interact with the lichens in any way. History. Vampires are also not allowed to delve into certain parts of their history. Judgment. And finally, breaking any of these laws required judgment from the council to determine the fate of the culprit. Despite their immortality and regenerative abilities, vampires could still die and suffer permanent damage from severe physical trauma, including dismemberment and severe blood loss. This was evident through the many vampires that were shown dying after being mauled by lichens, which, like the werewolves they descended from, were much stronger than most vampires. As mentioned earlier, they also suffered from a highly aggressive form of photosensitivity, which rendered them unable to come into contact with ultraviolet radiation and direct sunlight, which caused their bodies to burn to a crisp.
We have a serious problem. Definitely any radiated fluid of some sort.
Ultraviolet ammunition.
Daylight harnessed as a weapon.
Because the vampires featured in the Underworld series were born of a viral affliction and not a supernatural force, they also did not possess any of the other mystical weaknesses associated with mythological vampires like a sensitivity to crosses, holy water, garlic, or steaks. I really love the history and backstory involved in the creation of all the immortal races featured in the films, and due to all the requests I keep getting, I'm planning on covering the Immortals, early generations of werewolves, and the hybrids that were seen in the films down the track. Well, that's all for today, folks. Thanks to all of you guys who requested we take a look at the vampires featured in the Underworld series. If there's any other stuff you'd like me to check out, please don't hesitate to ask. As always, it's been a pleasure. Niyat here with Film Comics Explained. Thanks for stopping by.
Why are they after you?